Power up. Welcome to Energypreneurs, where I bring to you the exciting new opportunities in solar power, battery, and electric cars. I'm your host, Sohail Hasni. I have been tracking and analyzing these technologies on LinkedIn and Twitter for more than 10 years. Now we meet on podcast.
Good evening, everywhere, wherever you are. This will be a fun discussion. We just wanted to get a handle on this hydrogen. You cannot open your LinkedIn without a word in hydrogen on your. So maybe we just get a round of introduction on my screen. I think Xavier, you may be first.
Okay.
Just a short introduction, who you are, what you have been doing, and what's your interest in hydrogen.
Okay. I am Xavier Lara. I am recognized as one of the top experts in the world in CSP. I was a project director in several CSP plants, some of them the biggest solar complex in the world, not only in Spain, but in Morocco.
But what's your interest into hydrogen?
I am interested to hydrogen because indeed I am interested in ammonia, and to have ammonia you need hydrogen, and looks like the best vector to transport the hydrogen is the ammonia. Is the cheapest way to.
Let's move on to James.
Sure.
James, you are in. Xavier, you're in Spain, right? You're the farthest away. I think rest of us are in Australia. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, James.
Yeah, thanks, Sohail. So based down in Hobart, here in Australia, I'm technology innovation and hydrogen lead for Bivar RE. So we're a renewable developer, but we've diversified across a lot of the energy landscape, and hydrogen is a big part of that strategy for us. What I'm really interested in is understanding who's got the formula right on hydrogen, particularly green hydrogen. That's our focus, and looking at market activity and pulling those lessons learned across into a commercial vehicle that can scale, and really putting some momentum behind some of this talk around hydrogen. So navigating to the entry points is my focus, and really looking forward to today's discussion.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. And John, you want to go ahead next?
Sure. Hi, thanks, Sohail. My name is John Poljak. I run a website called keynumbers.com. We track the energy transition. I'm on the other side where not the experts, but a lot of non-experts and non-technical people who just need some very simple information, such as what's a kilo of hydrogen, how much is it going to cost me, and how is this whole energy transition going to affect my organization? So I kind of work with smaller organizations and companies going through this challenge. And I just focus on the key numbers. So my interest on the hydrogen side, I'm actually interested in a lot of the kind of energy transition topics. So everything from renewables to, say, demand response, and also understanding how much it costs for fossil fuels. On the hydrogen side, the thing that interests me is that it's actually got everyone's attention. I think that's been a big problem with the energy transition in the last 20 years. Everyone's been ignored, or not ignored, but it hasn't really picked up it hasn't been trending like hydrogen. So I think it's a balancing act between, it may not be the most efficient technology, but at the same time, if you've got the attention of the ministers and the decision makers, I think it's a case you're going to have to go with it in certain respects.
Yeah, let's see how we go. Where are you? You are in Sydney.
Oh, sorry,
right?
I'm Sydney, Australia as well. So yes.
Okay, good. Hi, I'm Sohail Hasni. I work for the Asian Development Bank. I travel quite a bit in the region. I've been mostly focused on renewable energy and other areas, energy efficiency, and I work with a lot of senior government officials. So questions do come up, and one of the reasons I thought this chat will be very useful. One of the governments came to us saying, okay, we want to do a hydrogen strategy. And I thought, okay, let me get my head around before we go and advise. I mean, of course, I know what's been happening. So yeah, so David, we started. You want to introduce
Yeah,
yourself?
hi,
Just saying
guys.
who you are, where you are, what's your interest in hydrogen? Yeah.
So yeah, I'm David, founder of I think 5 companies in total. One of them is I don't know if you can see it. It's an engineering company. I do hydrogen engineering with that company. One is a hydrogen EPC company. I'm also the founder of Mission Hydrogen, which is the host of very large hydrogen webinars. I see John smiling. He will be one of our speakers.
Looking forward to it.
Pardon?
Looking forward to it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be great. We have more than 1,000 participants on average, so it's really
Okay. I mean, coming back to here, what our objective is today to understand what's happening in hydrogen. I think James said it very nicely, to understand the technology and insight and what's the best model for it. And we try to understand who's doing what and what's the perspective. We all have different perspective as a professional. And then to see where it might be and just have a general conversation, have a bit of fun. So let's try to keep it to the discussion on the technology side of it, number side of it, rather than our individual roles and companies. Okay. So coming back, I just want to start. Where is hydrogen today? I mean, what's the cost? Because, and I also want to focus on green hydrogen because I personally don't believe in CCS, the carbon capture and storage things, because I've been seeing multiple pilots when you stand on the ground saying, oh my God, somebody's going to put a carbon dioxide inside, I might as well grow some trees. So that's a completely different discussion. But coming back, who wants to start? Where is hydrogen today? Just briefly.
So Sahel, I'm happy to lead off on that. And one thing I'd like to say initially is when you're engaging with this whole hydrogen space, the hydrogen economy, a really useful set of questions to ask are very basic lead-in questions that really interrogate, who you're talking to. Do they actually own and operate electrolyzers? At what scale? Where's their perspective coming from? So BayWa RE are operating megawatt scale electrolyzers in Europe. Like everyone else, we intend to scale that into sort of double-digit capacities next year and then into larger applications. But today, the numbers for us are sort of 5 to 7 euro per kilogram, which is quite unattractive for the majority of market applications that are touted as entry points for hydrogen. So it really shrinks that potential offtake to a few very select use cases. And for us, in the current environment, it's almost exclusively mobility as an offtake. So happy to hear from some of the other participants on today's call, but that's kind of how we've landed on a viable entry point for hydrogen. It's at that megawatt scale, and it's coattailing on mobility offtake.
Okay, so when you say megawatt scale, how many megawatt are we talking about?
So the operating assets we have are single digits. So we typically put, a 1.5 megawatt electrolyzer in a 30, 40, 50 megawatt solar project. And it's not even so much about understanding the commercials for us in this first deployment. It's around just building capability, understanding some of the technical performance of electrolyzers. What's the ramp rate response? Can we use them for capacity firming? How does that really dynamic application affect the operational costs and the life of the stack? So all of those queries are reflective of how emergent the whole space is. It's a fledgling industry. There's not a lot of literacy around what these assets look like, what they feel like, what the whole cost of ownership model looks like. So it's when people start talking about, a gigawatt project in the next 2 or 3 years, from scratch, I really question how much reliance that business model offers. From my perspective, you've got to step through it progressively. And that's where BayWa is right now. And I think most proponents globally, the most advanced of them are in a similar sort of space, to be honest, which leaves us with a lot of ground to make up if we're going to hit some of these really ambitious targets that we see in the media, on a daily basis.
Okay, good. David is smiling. So David, you want to respond, or you want to say your perspective on where are we today?
Yes, I was smiling because, I spent, well, I wouldn't say a lot of time, but quite some time on LinkedIn. And, in my own hydrogen and renewable energy bubble. And, I actually on a daily basis, I see people announcing projects in all, in countries. Like one is announcing 20 gigawatt, the next day his competitor is announcing 30 gigawatt, the day after you see 50 gigawatt, and stuff like that. So and there are lots of comments below. Congratulations, it's fantastic, it's fantastic, it's fantastic. The truth is, on PowerPoint, everything is very, very simple and very easy. But who's going to bring the money to invest, 50 gigawatt? And we have done, I have bought 6 electrolyzers in the last 12 months for my customers, and 3 alkaline, 3 PEM electrolyzers from 3 different companies. And if you see where these companies really are, in terms of execution, in terms of everything, giving guarantees, giving answers to your questions, what's the maintenance, what does the maintenance look like, what do I have to do, how do I have to do this and that, you get, well, if you get 20% of the answers you would like to get, you're already lucky. And we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 megawatt things. For
sort of average user who does not know anything, anyone of you want to summarize the different kind of hydrogen there is, the gray, green, and blue, and who wants to do that? Maybe, yeah, David, you want to just have a quick? We are talking about green hydrogen, basically taking a solar power, renewable energy, and using an electrolyzer to split it up and then supply to the system whatever the end use is, right?
To be honest, I only believe in green hydrogen because everything else is, I think you can, the rainbow offers lots of colors, and then some marketing experts thought that we need, the full set of colors for hydrogen. But I don't believe, I'm not an expert for geology, but I don't believe that there are, or from what I've heard, is that there are not enough holes in the ground to bury all the CO2. And I think we have made lots of mistakes in the past of thinking that the ground is big enough to, to bury all the stuff that we don't need anymore. And 50 years later, we learned that we have to take it back or do something with it. Then people thought that the atmosphere is big enough to use it to dump stuff. Now we start to learn that we have to change that. So I think there are different types of green, or 50 shades of green, whatever you want to call it. Different definitions of green. I think that's fine, but green is the only solution, my opinion.
Okay, good. That's what I said before you came in, that we want to keep our discussion to green hydrogen only. Now, on this electrolysis that we bought, hydrogen, the biggest complaint we see is huge energy losses, no? So how are you seeing that happening? Because I saw from the starting to end, the whole process, you take a renewable energy to the end, you lose about more than 70%, right? At different conversions, no?
Depends on the technology. If you were talking
Okay.
hydrogen cars and comparing it to, say, an ICE vehicle or electric vehicle, of course, there's maybe a 70% loss from well to wheels. But compared to hydrogen, and it stacks up against an ICE vehicle, it's just not competitive compared to, say, an electric vehicle. But the whole point of hydrogen is that you're not competing against electricity now, you're competing against electricity when you need it. When like when you can store it and then use it when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. So I don't think it's a fair comparison to kind of compare it against, say, direct electricity. You want to use it wherever you want. You want to use your renewable electricity directly, but there will be cases where you can't, where it just won't make sense, and you got to store it for a later date.
Well,
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just in general, I mean, the general rule, and this is coming from a Paul Martin report, you take 50 kilowatt hours of electricity and you put into a kilo of hydrogen, and then you get 33 kilowatts left out. So as a general rule, you're losing a third of your electricity. So that's a simple one.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to technologies such as like a hydrogen car, of course, you're going to lose it, driving it. But again, it depends on the technology. So say a hydrogen battery, I think the metal hydride battery the University of New South Wales doing is like a 50% round trip efficiency. So if you were to take solar from your roof, actually that's a good example. You take solar from your roof, you put into this hydrogen battery, you're going to lose 50% on the way out. The big problem is that it costs $20,000. So to recover that capex is going to take a long time, and on a unit cost basis, it gets expensive. But again, I think we're talking like, the initial days of hydrogen, and it's difficult to kind of, compare, do a full cost control at the moment. We have to understand where hydrogen is going to get to by, say, 2030. How much of the cost is going to come down by then. And that might be a different story when it comes to the competitiveness against other technologies.
Yeah, but John, the point I was trying to make, that electrolysis itself has a 30% loss, no? So that's what I was telling David, because he was looking at multiple electrolysis technologies. So David, how important is that energy loss in the electrolysis itself in your project?
Well, first of all, let me say that I think the 50 kilowatt hours per kilogram is very optimistic. That's number one. The values that we get, that we see from all the companies are rather like 54, 55, 56, 57 kilowatt hours per kilogram. And then you need the compression and the storage and so on. So what we usually guarantee to the customer is 60, not 50. So on paper, you can. The question is what do you take into account? If you take everything into account, you need 60, not 50. It will improve over time, no doubt about that. But so that's number one. And number two is I think that at the end of the day, this doesn't really matter because I think it's overrated. Let's put it that way. Here's why. We will hopefully get a new contract this week, and the customer will recover 100% of the waste heat and do district heating with that. And otherwise, he would use. I live in Central Europe, so he would use gas for domestic heat, which is coming from Russia, and which is something that people don't like anymore these days. So if you can avoid, let's take the politics out, but if you can use the waste heat and replace something else, then, well, you don't really lose that energy, you just use it for something else.
Yeah, so I mean, if you have a zero marginal cost electricity, of course, then it's a very different equation, right? So if you say it's a waste heat, it's going to be lost anyway. So that's a different economics, no? Because what I have been looking at, David, the point I was trying to make, the calculations that I have seen to get to hydrogen at $2.50 kilogram, we need less than half a cent for input electricity cost, right? And half a cent is still far away. But if you say, no, it's all the solar is going to be wasted during daytime, sorry, in the daytime because it's excess constraint. Okay, it's free. That's a different equation, no?
Yeah, it's well, you know, that project is in Switzerland. So Switzerland has those Korean trucks, and the customer, for the customer, there is no alternative, you know, because it's a supermarket chain or supermarket chains. So they have they have schedules, and they have to refuel the trucks very fast. Switzerland has a lot of hydro hydropower. So you cannot, of course, there's also pumped hydro, but these are usually at rivers. So you cannot store the electricity. Either you use it for something, or you just lose the energy. You lose the electricity. And if you cannot charge the batteries while, you know, the grid still has capacity, you have to store the energy. You have to do something with it. And I think hydrogen is the solution to store hydrogen, to store the energy. And if you can recover the waste heat for something useful and replace other sources of heat, then, well, these losses they are part of the game, but they are not prohibitive, or they are not, let's say, killing everything right from the beginning. And well, I think if I've learned something in my career on high-tech engineering, just anything, is that the future is very, very difficult to predict. You know, if you think back the internet in the 90s, 95, 96, 97, most people thought that this is something for nerds, and you know, you don't really need it because you can watch TV, you have the radio, you have newspapers, so why do you need the internet? I have a newspaper. And I think it's really difficult to predict what the technology will look like in 10 years or 20 years from now. So
yeah, I agree with that, David. It's really difficult, Sahel, to have vision of that end game. Like if you went back 2 or 3 decades and we're talking, you know, pick your technology, wind, solar, battery storage, we could have had the same discussion. You know, when are we going to hit price parity? How do you scale? How do you get down that experience curve? Hydrogen is no different, with the exception that a huge number of proponents are pushing hydrogen as this solution across multiple markets that have never been coupled. So we're talking everything from heating, mobility, gas to power, freight, long duration storage, natural gas blending, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. And I think some focus on where the very short-term viable entry points are is really important, because otherwise you keep going around in circles, and you never take any positive steps in sort of progressing that technology evolution. And so when I hear that argument, you know, when is it going to be cost viable at natural gas parity? That's essentially the $2 per kilogram. These days I actually tune out to those conversations. You know, it's not the focus of our business, and I don't think it should necessarily be the focus of any hydrogen proponents. It's more, what are the markets that are able to pay a premium for a green credential today? And there's 2 mechanisms to deliver that. One is there's a social license, so the consumer's willing to pay a premium. And as you grow a market for something like a green steel in particular, the experience to date has been very positive, that consumers are informed enough when they're buying their electric vehicle or whatever the commodity is, that they want some visibility on that embodied energy and the green credentials. And the second mechanism to deliver that is you're displacing a fuel equivalent that's also highly priced. So it's, in almost every case, it's not comparing hydrogen, the energy cost of hydrogen, to direct electrification. Because if you're going up against anything that can be electrified, the answer is always electrify it. So that's the first step in this net zero transition. It's not trying to compete hydrogen against every possible technology. It's take all of the technologies off the table that can be electrified. And it's what's left, that last 20%, 15%, 10% of decarbonization. That's where hydrogen will find a natural market, and gravitating towards those markets early is a really nice step to finding an entry point. So what we're doing at BayWa is looking towards the grey hydrogen market. So when we say grey hydrogen, it's conventional fossil fuel derived hydrogen, basically SMR of natural gas, let the CO2 just chug out. And that's a very big market. The problem with that market is it's very difficult to achieve scale. And that's why you keep hearing about these projects. Well, in a lot of cases, it's the same project. You come back every 6 months and it's gone from 250 megs to 500 to 1 gig. The reason they keep getting bigger is largely because the commercials don't work, and they're trying to get this economy of scale within a single project, particularly once we start talking about ammonia, sort of tying an export component into that project revenue stack. Those projects have a huge infrastructure footprint. There's bunkering, there's the port precinct, there's the loading, there's the vessels. That's a really big capital cost burden. And so the projects just get really big. What you really need to focus on in navigating into one of those markets is, where can we start where small is not prohibitive, and where are we displacing a fairly highly priced energy commodity that makes sense. And that's why we're in mobility. Like, mobility is not going to be this long-term hydrogen market. And the reason I can say that confidently is, if I go back to my earlier point, electrify anything that can be electrified, a lot of that mobility market can be electrified. But today, there's opportunity to start scaling hydrogen by displacing diesel. And it's the logical place to start. It's not necessarily the end game. It's kind of the lesser of two evils. We've got to do something to start getting some momentum. That's what we're doing. Happy to hear from some other perspectives on that.
Yeah, I think, James, that's a very good point, that we have to find the market that can pay. But one of the reasons why I get engaged into this price discussion, the cost discussion, is some people who do not understand the numbers, they get carried away and said, yes, sky will be blue, the price will come down, and we'll make the whole hydrogen. Then the issue is, as David was saying, to make that much hydrogen, you need that much solar. And you cannot, all the equipment that I'm saying, that thousands of gigawatt, terawatt that we'll need, that we might need the electrify or put a solar panel in every place we got. And some of those may not be viable, because today's discussion may be more like the jokes that we have seen about electric vehicle. Before the car comes in, people are saying, okay, if there are so many cars in New York, what are we going to do with the horse manure? So we are coming with that sort of mindset, because the technology that we see, we cannot, unless there is a huge breakthrough. The only difficulty I see in a hydrogen, because it's tied to the energy cost for electrolysis, it's all there. If you look at the ocean, there's all this hydrogen and oxygen, and you have sun upstairs. If you could miraculously get that out, no problem. But if you need to do electrolysis, you need electricity. So that's where the fundamental problem that we cannot add. Anyway, so that's a very good point that you have made. But I completely agree. For seasonal storage, for countries like I work in Tajikistan, Kyrgyz Republic, they have a huge hydropower. Summertime, all the electricity going down the drain. Politically, they have to import back from the neighbors in the winter time. But if they could convert the summertime and store seasonal, and batteries are never going to be seasonal storage because the huge capacity cost. Yes, that makes sense. But then people who are promoting hydrogen, who are trying to get public money to develop hydrogen, is saying hydrogen's solution to everything, no? So that's where the challenge is. So anyway, Xavier, you want to say something about the end use, ammonia, your favorite area?
Yes.
How does that work out?
Well, I really think that there is a huge case, a commercial case and business case for the green hydrogen because you need hydrogen to manufacture ammonia. I recall 1 year back, 1 year and a half back, when the prices of the green ammonia, the standard ammonia that is generated in oil and gas facilities with hydrogen that came from the cracking of the petroleum, the price of that ammonia was 250, 300 US dollar per ton. So then it was really very difficult to see how it could be a case for the green ammonia because with the actual status of the art of the technology, with the actual prices of the electrolyzers and etc., it was quite difficult to be under 600 US dollar per ton for the green ammonia. But the point is that due to the actual status of the economy with the inflation, the war in Ukraine, the disruptions in the supply chains, and etc., that make that the price of the fossil fuels ramp up to the sky. I am looking like this to a really funny graph that is dated on May 11, where the International Energy Agency says US ammonia prices rise in response to higher international natural gas prices, up by a factor of 6 in 2 years. Right now, the price of the green ammonia manufactured in the US Gulf Coast is over 1,600 US dollars per ton. The price of the green ammonia manufactured in Western Europe is at the same level, $1,650 per ton. And the only one that is cheaper, but still being 5 times the price that it was, is the green ammonia manufactured in Middle East with a price slightly over 1,200 US dollars per ton. If we keep into account that to manufacture fertilizers you need ammonia, and I was reading, for example, that from December last year, OCP, that is a Moroccan state-owned company that is one of the biggest manufacturers of fertilizers in the world. They are importing the ammonia. I think that is about 2 million tons per year. And the price of the ammonia that they are paying from last December never was under 950 US dollars per ton. This means
really... No, but the point you make is very valid, what James said earlier. So if you can lock some of these customers for the longer term, so you have a viable hydrogen product, right? So it's an opportunistic situation right now because of input fossil fuel constraints and others. But do you see that as a long-term sustainable to make it sort of $250, $300 a ton? Do you think, how far do you think the hydrogen industry will take to deliver you that price to be competitive? Otherwise, people may be happy to pay premium from green ammonia another 50. No?
I can tell you that the global demand of ammonia will be increased by a factor of maybe 1 order of magnitude, 10 times, by 2030. The ammonia itself, it's a fuel, not only a vector for hydrogen. And it's the perfect fuel to decarbonize the maritime industry, the ships. And you know that some of the most polluter ships, one single of them, have the capacity to pollute as maybe 100,000 cars. So that is.
So you see that green ammonia taking over that space. Of course, it can happen two ways. Of course, one, if the prices come down. Otherwise, if they pay a hefty carbon tax, then of course your green ammonia gets the premium. No, how do you see that's happening?
I see that it's happening because de facto we are right now living in a world that politically there is the willing that it will be with zero emissions of carbon dioxide. The sooner the better. And for example, in Europe, due to what is happening right now in Ukraine, there is the political willing to run out from Russian gas and Russian oil. And this means de facto that on top of the Green Deal, that it was a huge investment from the European Commission, it will be much more investments to decarbonize as much possible the industry. And to decarbonize the industry, hydrogen is the perfect player.
Okay, good. Let's hear from John. John, you have any view on that? This is the perfect time because there's an opportunistic market shaping up, and it's market going to grow called ammonia. You are the numbers man, no?
Actually, one of my big bugbears is that we talk in tons and kilos, and it's like, and then we're comparing it to gigajoules. So if you just look at like the energy density of ammonia, I think it's like 19 megajoules per kilo, or let's say 19 gigajoules per ton. Even at $500, you're looking at 500 divided by 20, you're talking $25 a gigajoule. So I can understand you can say that, you know, and historically we've had like, you know, Henry Hub's traded at 2 to 4, European gas is traded at say 4 to 8. Suddenly we're talking 25 as an optimistic number. So I could understand ammonia being used for fertilizer and for, you know, if you look at the hydrogen ladder and all the, you know, the very specific, you know, hydrogen as an ingredient for other chemicals makes complete sense. But we have to get used to the fact that the idea of cheap energy is gone. I think the history is, you know, you could go back through, you know, last few years is that, you know, if you go back a few years where we had peak oil theory and suddenly we've had these big crises and, we, you know, like, and we are, and I've got a background in oil and gas, and, you know, we're scrounging the earth, like we're going to the ends of the earth to find this really, you know, great material. So how do we communicate that to the audience to say, hey, look, it's not easy anymore. It's just like, you know, energy is going to be precious, and it's going to be 2 to 3 times more expensive for the time being. Of course, we'll get the prices down, but we're going to have to communicate that to the voters and to the wider, you know, to the consumers, or come up with some smarter ways. Just coming back also in terms of we kind of touched on the giga projects. I did an article about a year ago, and again, if you look at what people are, you know, all the big operators are putting a back of the envelope calculation together, and they're coming up with about $2.50. So your big projects such as the Asia Renewable Energy Hub, the ones done by ICE, they all kind of come in at about $2.50. So I just had a simple exercise that if we took today's wind farms, the biggest ones in each country, and the solar farms, and then CSIRO came up with they do a generation cost report where they have a number for hydrogen. And these are very conservative, very high cost ones. And even on the gigawatts, the gigascale projects, today, if you were to kind of connect up those same wind farms and solar farms and use those same figures from CSIRO, you would get to about $3.50 a kilo. So it's actually not too bad where we are today. And that's going to come down substantially. Now, the biggest problem is, and James alluded to this, is that you can't, the supply chain's not there. You know, there's just, where are you going to find this stuff? So someone's going to make a commitment at a very high level to say, look, we know where we're going. Let's start building the suckers as quickly as possible. And we'll find lots of uses for it. Just another thing also, just to kind of, you know, for the general public, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like when we're talking kilos of hydrogen, we're talking 120 megajoules a kilo. So effectively, you need about 8 kilos of hydrogen to make 1 gigajoule of energy. So that makes, so if you talk $2 a gigajoule, sorry, $2 a kilo, what we're actually talking about is about $15, say $14 to $15 a gigajoule for hydrogen on a hydrogen. So when we talk a lot about the heat type of applications, You know, it's a lot more expensive than natural gas. That's the reality. But is it, you know, you know, you look at Germany and Europe, Europe in particular, they've made commitments to net zero, legally binding. They have to do it. So their only options really are something like a hydrogen, or basically demand response, which is, sorry, I'll be a bit cheeky here, but it's kind of like controlled blackouts. So do you want to just stop, do you want to shut down industry for a couple of days at a time, or do you want to shut down, you know, people's homes, or, you know, put a jacket on? Luckily, it's a warm night here in Sydney in the middle of winter. But these are the kind of things that you need to kind of communicate to the people and educate people as well. And that, yeah, so that's, you know, that was my two cents worth.
David, any comments? David looks like, okay, things that I don't believe.
I'm trying to be diplomatic.
I like your body language.
No,
I like your body language.
Body language is like,
oh my God,
no.
what am I hearing?
No. I think, I mean, the first thing that is needed, let's say Central Europe has a big problem. We can produce a lot of, let's say, solar in summer, but winter is a problem. December, January, February is certainly a big problem. And I think that, you know, a mandate to put solar panels on every roof would help a lot. And a battery in every house would help a lot, you know, just to bridge the night. But winter is certainly a problem. So to increase the efficiency of everything we can, and you know, smart metering, smart whatever, smart everything. So to match production and demand makes a lot of sense, and we haven't even started here in Germany. So it's that's actually a no-brainer. We just have to do it, and the technology is there, and everything is there. We just have to do it, and I think the people in Central Europe have the money to do it, to invest it. I think it's much more difficult in other countries where, you know, so you know that much better than me, but we've done a project in Mongolia, for example. Mongolia, a very, very cold country, and let's say on average, but especially in winter, and people are, let's say, relatively poor. There are lots of people who certainly cannot afford to invest any type of money into, you know, they live in tents at minus 30 degrees C. So to keep them warm and alive is a huge challenge, and they use coal to heat. So so. You know, the air quality is very, very bad, and so there's, you know, there are so many different challenges. So I think that the discussion of shall we do this or that, I think this is a purely academic discussion. I think we have to do everything we can, and because everything we do related to renewable energy is still a drop in the ocean, and compared to what we have to do to decarbonize the planet. So it's we have to reduce 50 billion tons of or get rid of 50 billion tons of CO2 emissions every year. So we have to do everything we can, whether it's ammonia or hydrogen or direct electrification. So.
Yeah, I like those points that to sort of say, yes, we have to do everything we can. We have to be opportunistic as to where it makes sense, because technology is evolving, because some of the publication are saying that people take a general approach and hydrogen is coming, that will fix all your problems. And these are coming from people who are not so technical and then get emotional. These are the business development people who will tell you, say yes, like I had a discussion with someone in an electric car. And I said, no, you don't have to sell. I've been involved for the last 10 years. I know, but you should highlight these features. Don't say things unnecessary. Electric car actually sells by numbers, but pick up these numbers if you want to convince someone. Sorry, James, you were about to respond.
Just talking to a couple of points from John and David, I think we do actually have quite a effective communication pathway to the consumer, it's price, right? I think one of the interesting dynamics from the current energy crisis is it's the first time that I can recall where that message has broken through. And, you know, the cure for high prices is the high price. You know, that's the trigger that really starts to change consumer purchasing behavior and consumer preference. And hopefully that is enough of a dynamic that we start to see some pull from the consumer side of that equation. I think that's what's needed. A lot of this discussion, you know, around different applications, different markets, different price points, it's common commentary that you'll get in a lot of different forums. But cutting through that, proponents are actually taking projects forward and investing in particular derivatives and, you know, particular production capacity. And I'm really interested to move the conversation on from, you know, this kind of theoretical premise of, okay, where do we start? What looks good? What stacks up financially? What are those more aggressive early adopters actually doing? And why does it work? And, you know, we've seen big offtake agreements signed in Europe. So, you know, JCB has a big one in the UK, Covestro have a big one in Germany. Trying to interrogate those deals, I think, can be really informative. You know, have they found a magic formula? Can we lean into that approach as much as possible and try and scale? I'm really keen to know the answer to that, particularly with sort of the wealth of experience on this call. Everything that I can see sort of suggests that it's not, the mechanism isn't quite there yet. It doesn't offer enough reliance. And we've still got a little bit of work to do, but as an industry, sort of championing that type of early mover activity. And, you know, where's the associations kind of driving the market, developing the market? That stuff really has to have a fire lit under it, because we need really to hit the ground running on this stuff really quickly. Otherwise, you know, 2030 is not this huge horizon anymore. It's looming pretty large. If you want to build one of these giga projects, like let's talk the Asian Renewable Energy Hub, BP just took a big equity stake in that project. So if you don't know about that, you know, Google it, because it's quite an interesting test case. But 26 gigawatts of generation, you know, that's probably COD on that is probably 2030 plus already, even if they had all their approvals and it was all. So I think the message we need to communicate is we need tangible action now. And how do we incentivize that? I don't know, but keen to hear some innovative ideas around that.
Okay, no, that's a very good point that you made, that there are projects that's happening. What's making those projects viable right now? But I think that you answered in a way, partially people have found pocket of markets where people maybe are willing to pay for many strategic reasons and things like that. Because then you mentioned 2030, which is not very far away. It's sort of slowly crept in, right? So what will happen in 7-8 years' time? Because we see the publications, I posted some forecast today, 2050, some obscene numbers. To achieve that through solar, you need to put solar in every ground that is available. And then you read at the same time, people say, okay, we are running out of this material for solar panels and batteries. And they also want to batteries. So where do you think? I think we are running out of time as well. I mean, maybe just do a round around, where do you think 2030, the gas industry, the hydrogen industry will be? Maybe John, we start with you. You are the numbers man.
Oh. 2030. I believe I think people like David will need a few years to communicate the message and expand it. So we need his marketing skills to kind of go into hyperdrive. So that would be the first one. I think the real big push is going to be from financial institutions, insurance companies, and investment banks. From what I'm hearing, they've all signed up to reporting requirements such as TCFD, where they're basically saying we have to go we're only going to invest in companies that are net zero, and they haven't understood the implications of that. And once that gets to boardroom level, it's a tick box, and people will spend whatever they need to get it off the boardroom agenda. So once people start realizing in the next few years that it's going to be very difficult to get insurance, to get refinancing, to get working capital, you'll see a big incentive to go, how do we keep business as usual? So I think you'll see a lot there, especially maybe in the mining sector. But I think that'll be the key thing. That you'll see a lot of announcements, but again, what you're seeing from James and David is that these projects take a long lead time. You know, you might get some, I think the H2U project in Gladstone, I think that's like scheduled for like 2028 or 2029. So if you get a few big, nice projects like that, industrial projects happening, I think that would be a good sign by 2030.
Okay, I mean, Xavier, you want to give your views about 2030 and beyond? I mean, you're already very happy. If the war continues, I think your ammonia problem is solved, but the war will end and the price will come down. So what's your view about 2030?
My answer to a question that you did before about the business case for the green hydrogen and the green ammonia, not just at this momentum, at this moment that the prices are so higher due to Ukraine war and etc. My answer is very simple. We can see, as we saw last week, that the big majors, the big oil companies, that has a very, very, very big pockets, and they are the biggest manufacturers of green hydrogen. They are moving to the green. Last Wednesday, British Petroleum announced that they are taking the lead in the Asian Renewable Energy Hub. That is a project of $36 billion to manufacture 1.6 million tons of green hydrogen per year and 9 million tons of green ammonia per year. This will be placed in Australia, in Western Australia, Pilbara region. So if the guys that right now are the manufacturers of the green hydrogen and green ammonia are moving to the green, means that the business case is there. And so I am feeling really very, very positive about 2030. And we are living in the middle of an energy revolution, and the things are moving ahead, not in a linear way, but I think that we will see some changes, nearly exponential.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you. David, you want to make some comments?
Yeah, I just want to make additional comments. So I agree with everything I agree with everything that everybody said in the last hour. I think what is really needed are new players, because obviously, I mean, the big oil companies and so on, that's fine. But if you look at the stock market, and if you look at Linde and Air Liquide and so on, they have very, very good, very high market value. Because they make a lot of money. And if you look at the mobility market, for example, I think the automotive industry is very strong because the suppliers, they control the full supply chain. And if you look at the supply chain of electrolyzers, for example, it's either not there or let's say in a very, very early stage. And I think we need strong, very strong, large companies that are able to deliver these projects, because who will deliver a €1 billion or dollar hydrogen project? this can only be, a very strong and very, very large company. And you need factories, you need automation, you need everything for hydrogen. And we have to start with that tomorrow. Otherwise, you don't build an electrolyzer factory in 2 weeks. So we have to start with that now and invest money. And I can tell you that I don't see that yet, because the factories that I know are, let's say, very, very manual and very, reliant on Joe and Bill and people with some experience. And we have to build up that experience in these factories, and that takes years, no doubt about that. So we have to start with that now. Otherwise, we will still be in a very early stage in 2030, because we have to grow exponentially. I'm trying to make contributions, but I can't fix it on my own.
So yeah, I think so. I think we had a very good discussion. So coming back, I somehow had a different perspective coming in, and living with a different perspective, and that's the value of all your contribution. Thank you as well. That we need to have some sort of sense of urgency in hydrogen, and for more practical, realistic marketplace, rather than looking at a very macro place based on what we know today, because things might change. So coming to the point that James mentioned earlier, there are pocket of opportunities happening there. Pocket of opportunities are always there. People are there who will pay a premium, and some people are already have a very good offtake contracts. We need to understand where and what people are doing. That's important. And then John also mentioned that how do you get as the compliance issue comes in, people sitting in a boardroom, they will not care as to how we get there. They will look into these processes, and as long as the technology is credible, they will promote those things, because those incentives will be there, and that will fundamentally change many things as well. And of course, Xavier's point is also very valid, that some of the big projects that are happening and numbers are actually there. And I think the point that everyone make, that are big points. And then I think, David, you mentioned very good that you need all these big players to come and change the rule of game, like what happened during Australian electricity privatization in the early 90s. I remember all those people came in. I'm not from the industry, but I'm going to be the head of the trading manager for PowerCo or some of the distribution companies in Victoria, because I used to work for the State Electricity Commission. Anybody coming from outside is, who is this person? But these are the people who transform the industry. So thank you very much for gentlemen, for all your time. I think we had good interaction. This was just an experiment for me. See how it goes. I hope this was useful for you all. What do you think? Any comments? Any last minute comments you want to say to anyone?
No, thank you for organizing. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I would like to give you as well thanks for organizing, and just the last comment. To produce green ammonia, due to the inertia of the Haber-Bosch reactors, you need a 24/7 supply of electricity. CSP is perfect for that.
I knew that will come. He's the CSP man. Yeah, we could have another long 1 hour discussion on the CSP and then fuel cell car versus electric car. But anyway, thank you very much again.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, go on, John. Yeah, you want to talk about some numbers, yeah.
So what we're looking to do is understand the cost of hydrogen. So when we see an announcement, they'll say it's $70 billion and they'll produce 3.5 million tons. And what I'm looking to do is say, okay, let's just basically divide the total cost by the total quantities, and I get a rough number. So I get $2.50. So I can add that to the whiteboard, and now I can start coming along and saying Western, and I say, well, what happens today? So I say today, I've got the I take the Warraduggerah, I think, wind farm, which came out at $350 million for a 180 megawatt farm. And there's also a solar farm, which is about $1 million a megawatt hour. And again, I'm just using the CSIRO numbers for the electrolyzers, and I get to a number of just $3.50 today. Now, again, once we get a bit cheaper, so let's say we can get the electrolyzer down to $1,000 plus balance of plant, I get it down to $3. But again, I'm going to have to basically cut the costs of my wind farm. So that wind farm is going to go from 350 to say 250. I'll cut a bit more. And again, the solar farm's got to come down 100 million. So now I'm getting down to my $2.50 number. So it's not too difficult. I mean, it's difficult, but it's not too difficult. And just one thing, this is where I kind of want to educate people as well, is, sorry, I've got one. Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to find one. Actually, and then what I'm trying to also do is say to people, look, this is grey hydrogen, and this is what we're talking about. At the moment, if I was to get my grey hydrogen at, like say, historically $4 an MMBTU, I'm looking at $1 a kilo. Now, of course, today it's a bit higher. So if I go Henry Hub, it's about 8. And if I go to like today, whatever, $20 a megawatt, I'm up to about $4. The big question is, how do I get a carbon? What is a carbon tax to? So at the moment, the carbon tax in Europe is about $80 a ton, and that can get me the costs. And this is where green hydrogen is coming in cheaper. So again, I've just done, and again, this is an offshore project, which is expensive, and it's about $5 a kilowatt. So the whole point is that what we're trying to do is provide people the tools to make simple kind of like assessments of their, and this is what we plan to go through with David on Mission Hydrogen, to go through the levelized costs and give people, educate people in terms of, it shouldn't be scary when you see kilos of hydrogen. You should be able to kind of anticipate, I can see the electrolyzer cost coming down. How is it going to impact hydrogen cost? So thank you for letting me share that for the last few minutes.
No worries. And James, the thing that we did not discuss, the dark side of hydrogen, maybe we can have a separate discussion, but if you can give us a bit of insight, that would be fantastic. James?
Yeah, thanks, Sahel. I'm really just interested to lift the bonnet on this whole opportunity and understand some of the motivation and intent behind different industry segments. So, we've mentioned oil and gas a lot of times during this call. Big oil and gas aren't necessarily supportive of this whole green hydrogen opportunity. And in my experience, they can actually be quite contrary to moving that forward. And so I'm very keen to draw a divide between green and blue. It hasn't really happened yet. The hydrogen conference is always a merging of all these different colors and different proponents. I really think we have to separate and go our different ways if we're going to focus in on the use case that makes sense. And lifting the lid on that, you really start to understand what the narrative is behind some of the roadblocks. So cost of energy, for example, it's all well and good to sort of project ever decreasing levelized costs from wind and solar. A lot of the wind OEMs at the minute are bleeding cash. It's a question of survival for them, not necessarily progressing that technology and refining efficiency. So it is difficult for me to sort of bridge that divide between where we are now and where we want to be when these sort of giga scale projects hit commercial viability. And I think the litmus test for that is when they're bankable, right? Today, there isn't a debt provider that would touch a hydrogen project. And the reason for that is none of the offtake can be contracted. When that changes, the market will move really quickly. And there's mechanisms to move in that direction. Largely, it involves a lot of public funding, so public subsidy and government support. That's what we need visibility on, and ensuring that public money isn't wasted. The dark side of hydrogen is really giving visibility on where that money is spent, how effectively it's spent, and making sure it's not used by certain sectors to position liabilities on their balance sheet as assets. And that's effectively what blue hydrogen is. So maybe a conversation for another time.
Good point. Yes, very good point. Putting things into disguise.
Sorry, guys. I was told I have to leave because my next guests are already waiting.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very
I'm
much,
sorry.
everyone.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Thank
See
you.
you.
Okay,
See
bye.
you
Good night.
on-
Thanks, Sahel.
Thank you for joining us this week. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to our show. Also, leave your comments and review if you enjoyed today's episode. Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter at shasni for updates. That's SHASNIE. Once again, this has been Energypreneurs, connecting you to the innovative opportunities in solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles. Stay tuned.